Hi everyone, welcome to Talk Easy. Today Catherine and Mike will explain prepositions like in the morning, on the table, and at the door. Learn tips to master prepositions and avoid confusion. Let's dive in.
All right, so today we're diving deep into something that might seem pretty basic on the surface. But as anyone who's really gotten into the nuances of English knows, it can actually be deceptively tricky.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're talking about prepositions.
Okay.
And in particular,
Yeah.
we're going to focus on in, on, and at.
All right.
I'm seeing from the research that you sent over that you're ready to move past just the basics here.
Yeah, I think we can definitely go a bit deeper with this.
Awesome.
Yes.
So we're going to tackle how these prepositions work with time, place, and even movement.
Okay.
And I have a feeling we might uncover some surprises along the way.
I think we will.
Great. So why don't we just jump right in and start with those prepositions of time?
All right. Sounds good.
Now, I feel like I know the basic rules, like, in for months and on for days.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious to see what else is out there.
Well, something that really struck me when I was looking through those sources you gave me was how the way we use in, on, and at for time is actually connected to their original meanings, like way back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Like in, for example, it comes from this root that basically means enclosed or within.
Interesting.
So when you think about it, it makes total sense that we use it for these longer stretches of time, like, in the year 2024 or in the summer.
That's so cool. I never even thought about the history of prepositions before, but it makes so much sense.
It's like they're carrying around these old meanings inside them.
Yeah, exactly. So if in is about being enclosed, what about on? What's its story?
Well, on originally had this idea of being above or supported by.
Okay.
So when we say on Monday, it's almost like we're picturing that day, like physically resting on the week.
Whoa, I see. It's like those days are actually part of the structure of the week, right?
Right, exactly.
So in is about enclosure, on is about support. What about at?
Oh, at is super interesting.
Okay.
It originally had this sense of nearness or presence, which kind of explains why we use it for those very specific points in time.
Okay.
Like at 7 p.m. or at noon.
Right.
We're like zeroing in on a particular moment.
I'm telling you, this is making me totally rethink prepositions. It's not just about grammar rules. They're like these little echoes of like ancient ways of thinking.
I know, right? It's like finding these linguistic fossils.
Yes. Okay, so we've got time covered, but what about prepositions of place? I'm guessing in, on, and at are going to come up here too.
Oh, absolutely. And just like with time, there's a lot more going on than you might expect at first.
Okay, hit me with it.
So like in is generally used for spaces that are enclosed, like in the library or in a box.
Right, makes sense.
But one of those articles you sent
Yeah.
pointed out that in can also be about being surrounded by something, even if it's not like physically closed in.
Okay.
So you could say, I'm in the crowd or lost in thought.
So you mean it's not about actual walls, it's more about feeling enveloped by something,
Right.
right? So if in is about being surrounded, where does on fit in with place?
Well, on still has that idea of contact or support we were talking about.
Right.
Think about examples like on the beach or on the table.
Okay.
You're directly on a surface.
Gotcha. So in is within, on is contact.
Mhm.
What about at? Where does that one land?
Well, at is often used for really specific spots, like at the bus stop or at the entrance.
Right.
But it can also show like a position within a bigger context.
Ooh, okay.
Like you might say at the top of the page or at the end of the line.
So at can be both super specific, but also about where something fits in a bigger picture.
That's it.
This is so helpful. And, it makes me wonder, are there ever times when it gets tricky to decide between in, on, and at for place?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the lines can get kind of blurry.
Ooh, I knew there had to be some tricky parts. Give me an example.
Okay, think about in the car versus at the car.
Okay.
In the car means you're inside, right?
Right.
But at the car could mean you're next to it, or maybe you're, doing something with it.
So the preposition changes the whole situation.
It totally does.
So it's not just memorizing rules, it's about understanding how these words work in different scenarios.
That's exactly it. And that's what makes this so interesting.
It really is. I'm already feeling a whole new level of appreciation for these little words.
That too.
But wait a minute. We've still got one piece of the puzzle missing. Prepositions of movement.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about time and place, but how do in, on, and at work when things are moving?
Oh, that's where things get really dynamic.
Okay, bring it on. I'm ready.
Well, one of your sources had this really cool idea.
Okay.
They said that prepositions of movement are often like a metaphorical journey.
Ooh, a metaphorical journey. I'm listening.
Like, think about the phrase going into a meeting.
Yeah.
It's not just about physically walking into a room.
Right.
It's like entering a whole new situation, a new dynamic.
I see. So the preposition adds this extra layer of meaning, like a transition is happening.
Exactly. And this idea of a metaphorical journey applies to other prepositions of movement, too.
Okay, I'm ready for some more examples. So how does on work with movement?
Okay, well, on usually gives this sense of getting onto something or continuing along a path.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd say, like, get on the bus or walk on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
There's a feeling of direction, like you're moving forward.
So on keeps us moving along a path, while in is more about entering a new space or situation.
Right.
Okay, so what about at? How does it guide our movements?
Well, at, when we're talking about movement, usually points us towards, like, a destination or a specific point.
Okay.
So think about, like, arrive at a station or throw the ball at the target.
Right.
There's this idea of aiming for something specific.
So at is like the end point, the goal we're moving towards.
That's a great way to put it.
I'm loving this. Okay, but before we go any further, maybe we should just take a minute to make sure we've got all this straight.
Yeah, good idea.
I mean, there's been a lot of information, and I don't want to get lost in this prepositional jungle.
I hear ya.
So why don't we pause here and just recap everything we've covered so far?
Sounds good to me.
Great, because, after this little break, we've still got a lot more prepositional ground to cover.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I'm excited to keep exploring.
Me too.
All right, so let's take a moment to organize all these fascinating insights about in, on, and at.
Okay.
And then we'll be ready for the next leg of our prepositional adventure.
Sounds good.
All right, stay with us.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our exploration of all things preposition.
Oh my gosh, my brain is definitely feeling the workout.
Uh-huh.
But in a good way, Like we're cracking the code.
That's a great way to put it.
Mhm.
And speaking of codes,
Yeah.
one thing that really hit me while I was looking through these sources was how much context really matters with prepositions. Like, the same little word can have completely different meanings depending on how it's being used.
Ooh, I love a good language puzzle. Give me an example.
Okay, so take the word with, right?
Okay, with, yeah.
It can mean you're doing something together with someone,
Right.
like I'm going to the park with my friend.
Right.
But it can also be about using something, like I'm writing with a pen.
Oh, that's true.
And it can even mean you're like against something, like I'm arguing with my brother.
Wow, yeah, I never thought about it like that, but you're right.
With is like a chameleon.
It totally is.
It just blends in with its surroundings.
Okay, so if one preposition can have all these different meanings, how do we know which one is the right one?
That's where we put on our detective hats.
All right, I'm ready.
We've got to look at the whole sentence, the words around the preposition, and even the whole situation to figure it out.
So it's not just about memorizing definitions.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
more about, like, understanding how it works in each sentence, right? And that makes me think, are there any clues we can look for?
One thing that can really help is paying attention to how verbs and prepositions go together.
Like, certain verbs always go with certain prepositions.
Yeah, a lot of times specific verbs just naturally go with specific prepositions.
Okay, I like where this is going. Can you give me some examples?
Sure, think about depend.
Okay, depend.
We always say depend on something, never depend in or depend at.
Oh, you're totally right. It's like the on is part of the meaning of depend.
It totally is.
Yeah.
Another good one is interested in.
Okay.
You wouldn't say interested at something.
Oh.
You have to use in.
Right.
That little in is carrying a lot of meaning there.
Okay, so depend on and interested in.
Yeah, those are good ones to keep in mind.
Are there any other verb preposition pairs that trip people up?
One that I see confused a lot is agree with versus agree to.
Oh, yeah.
Agree with means you have the same opinion as someone,
Right.
but agree to is more like you're saying yes to a plan or a suggestion.
That is tricky. I could see myself mixing those up.
Yeah, it's a common one.
Okay, so paying attention to those verb preposition pairs is a good strategy.
Definitely.
It's like building a mental library of what sounds right.
It totally is. The more you read and listen to English, the more your brain just starts to pick up on those patterns automatically.
I love that. It's like we're training our brains to be preposition pros.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of being a pro,
Yeah.
one of your sources said something that really got me thinking.
Okay.
They said that getting good at prepositions isn't just about avoiding mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about using them on purpose to make your writing more interesting.
Wait, so prepositions can do more than just be grammatically correct. They can actually make our writing better.
They really can. Think about the difference between saying he walked through the forest
Okay.
versus he walked into the forest. Through makes it sound like a journey that continues on the other side.
Right.
While into really emphasizes that he's entering a new space.
Oh, I see. It's like the preposition is painting a picture in our minds.
It totally is, and that's where things get really cool.
All right, I'm listening.
We can choose our prepositions carefully to, like, guide the reader's experience.
Oh, wow.
Create suspense.
Yeah.
Even make them feel certain emotions.
This is blowing my mind. It's like prepositions are a secret weapon for writers.
You know, they really are. And the best part is, it's not even about just picking the right preposition. It's about understanding how all the different options can create different effects.
Okay, I am officially hooked on the power of prepositions.
I'm right there with you.
But before we get too carried away with all the fancy stuff,
Right.
maybe we should talk about some of the common mistakes that people make.
Good point, because even the best writers can slip up sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, hit me with those common preposition pitfalls. I'm ready to learn.
Okay, one that I see all the time is using in when it should be on, especially when we're talking about transportation. Like you'd say, I'm on the train, not I'm in the train.
Right.
Emphasizes that you're, like, situated on top of something.
Gotcha. On for surface, in for inside.
Exactly. Another common one is using at for movement when you really need to.
Okay.
Like you wouldn't say, I'm going at the store.
Right, you'd say, I'm going to the store.
Exactly. You need to show the direction you're moving.
I've definitely made that mistake before. It's easy to get mixed up.
It happens to the best of us.
Okay, so we've talked about context, verb preposition pairings, and even common mistakes.
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about as we navigate the world of prepositions?
You know, one thing that's really important to remember is that English is always changing. It's a living language.
Yeah.
And that means the way we use prepositions can change too, depending on where you're from, or even just personal preference.
So there might not always be just one right answer when it comes to prepositions.
Exactly. There's often room for different interpretations and styles.
That's actually kind of cool.
It is. It means we can be creative and playful with language.
I like that. It's not about being a robot and following the rules perfectly.
No.
It's about understanding how prepositions work and using them in a way that makes sense for us.
Exactly. And that brings up another really interesting point.
What's that?
The role of intuition in language learning. I mean, grammar rules are important, but at the end of the day, we often just have a gut feeling about what sounds right.
That's so true. Sometimes I overthink things way too much.
We all do it.
But often, if it just sounds right, it probably is.
Exactly. And that intuition, especially with prepositions, comes from being around the language a lot.
Okay, so the more you read, listen, and speak, the better your preposition sense will be.
It's like learning to play music. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
Oh, I love that analogy. So it's not just about memorizing rule, it's about developing our ear for what sounds right.
You got it. And just like with music, there's room for personal style and language, too.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about finding our own voice and using language in a way that feels authentic.
Exactly. And that's what makes language so amazing.
Oh.
It's not just a way to communicate. It's a way to create, to inspire, to connect.
I am loving this conversation. This deep dive has been such an eye-opener.
I'm so glad. And you know, there's even more to uncover.
Wait, there's more? I'm hooked.
In the next part, we'll wrap things up and talk about how to really conquer the world of prepositions.
I can't wait. All right, everyone, be sure to stick around for the final part of our deep dive.
It's going to be good.
All right, welcome back to our preposition party.
Haha, I like that.
We've covered so much ground already.
We really have.
Time, place, movement, all those hidden meanings.
Yeah. It's amazing how much depth there is to these little words.
I know, right? And just when I thought we'd explored it all, your research hit me with even more insight.
Oh, there's always more to discover.
Okay, I'm ready for round 3. What else have you got for me?
Well, one of the articles you sent talked about how important it is to be okay with language changing.
Okay.
I mean, prepositions, like all words, they can change their meanings over time.
That makes sense. Language is always evolving, right?
Exactly. It's a living thing.
Okay, so if prepositions can change, how do we keep up?
Just got to stay curious.
Okay.
Be open to new ways of using them, even if they seem a little strange at first.
So it's not about holding onto the rules super tightly. It's about being aware that language can change and adapt.
That's it.
I like that perspective.
And that brings us to another really important point.
What's that?
Intuition.
Intuition.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that gut feeling you have about what sounds right.
Oh.
I mean, grammar rules are great, but sometimes
yeah.
you just know what sounds right, even if you can't explain exactly why.
That's so true. I feel like sometimes I get stuck trying to remember all the rules,
I know, right?
but often my first instinct is usually the best.
It often is. And, that intuition, especially with prepositions, it comes from just spending a lot of time with the language.
Okay, so the more you read, listen, talk,
Mm-hmm.
the better your gut feeling will get.
Exactly. It's like learning an instrument. The more you practice, the more natural it feels.
That's a great analogy. So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about developing a sense for what sounds right.
That's a great way to put it. And, just like with music,
Yeah.
there's room for personal style and language, too.
Oh, I like that. So it's not about being perfect.
Nope.
It's about finding your own way of expressing yourself.
Exactly. And that's what makes language so cool.
I know, right? It's not just about being correct, it's about being creative.
It's about connecting with people.
This whole conversation has been amazing.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I feel like I've learned so much, not just about prepositions, but about language in general.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It really is. And you know what? I'm feeling inspired to go out there and just keep exploring.
That's awesome.
Language is like a giant playground. There's so much to discover.
There really is.
Well, I want to thank you so much for guiding us through this prepositional adventure.
It's been my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, we hope you've learned a thing or two about those tiny but mighty words called prepositions.
They really are mighty.
And remember, keep playing with language, keep exploring, and most importantly, have fun.
Have fun.
All right, that's all for today's deep dive.
Until next time.
See ya!